Yeah.
Right, hi Kevin.
Hello.
Just wondered if you could just give us a brief summary of why you're over here from Canada. What's your mission in England? What you're trying to get across here?
Well, I often joke with people that I'm seeking political asylum over here in Europe because the conditions are getting a lot more difficult for our work in Canada. For about 15 years, I've been working to expose crimes against children in the Indian boarding school system and realizing now that it's something much bigger than I could have imagined earlier. That it's international, it's very ancient, it's a whole system of genocide, really, against women, against children, against the innocent, under the auspices of the church. And so what I'm here to do is to seek allies, to build support, and also to go to the place where a lot of this originated. You know, I recognized as a European settler in Canada, my people came to escape persecution, but also we came to the New World as a result of a whole genocide that had been happening here for many centuries. The reality is that the same forces that caused it here caused it in the New World as well. And so it's time for us to link up. We have to link up across borders and understand what's been killing us for all these centuries. So I guess in a nutshell you'd say that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and just explain briefly about the summonses that you've been putting out here.
Well, today's September 21st, 2010, and what's been going on for the last 3 or 4 days is being historic, really, in London. The first and largest protest against the Pope in history, calling for justice, for him to account for the crimes he's done. That occurred in London. We had probably between 15 and 20,000 people marching in the streets, and the whole variety of people. And out of that, we realized the need to actually call the Pope in particular and the Vatican to account for these crimes. So last June, we established, through survivors organizations in 5 different countries, we established the International Tribunal into crimes of church and state. And what we issued on 2 days, actually, the first time outside Westminster Cathedral where the Pope was conducting a Mass, and then at the Vatican Ambassador's residence yesterday, we delivered a public summons. And what the summons says is, you're accused of these crimes, of aiding and abetting child rapists within the church, actually colluding in those crimes, and also responsibility for the genocide in the Indian boarding schools, in Ireland, in the Catholic orphanages that caused incredible harm and damage all over the world, these kinds of institutions. So we issued the summons to the Pope. It's a legal summons. It's recognized under international law that people have the right to do that. And we went to like I say, the church. We couldn't get close to the Pope because of all the massive security around him, so we published it, posted it publicly, and read it out loud outside the church. And then yesterday we went down to the Papal Nuncio residence in South London, and we delivered it. We got that on film as legal evidence that he has been served.
Yeah.
And so now he has until April 4th to respond. And if he doesn't respond, he can be tried in absentia. Usually when you don't contest something, when you don't show up, it means you're admitting you're guilty. You're admitting you don't contest what's being claimed against you.
Yeah.
So under common law, common sense, that if he doesn't respond to this, he's not disputing what we're claiming about him.
Yeah.
He also opens himself up to sanctions at that point as well, because we can then apply in an international criminal court and other courts to say this man is a criminal, and when he shows up in any country that's a signatory to the ICC convention, he could be arrested and tried in a normal court. So, it's pretty serious, and I'm very happy about the way things are developing, because the media coverage about all this has been quite substantial too. I was interviewed continually about this when I was here.
Yeah, no, that's good. You've got to get the message out there. Now, I know you've been persecuted over in Canada for exposing this information. I was just wondering if you could tell us about your latest story, where you've been basically chucked off the air, or chucked off the radio station that you were doing, radio program you were doing over in Canada. Just wondered if you could elaborate on that story.
Well, what happened in a nutshell was on August 9th of this year, I had been broadcasting on my regular program, Hidden from History, which I've had on the air at Vancouver Co-op Radio for 9 years now. And we were doing a show on the apparent involvement of local police with several serial killers in the abduction, torture, and killing of local women, mostly Aboriginal women. And we had eyewitnesses describing that they saw these things occur. 10 minutes after we broadcast that show, I was banned from the station without reason, without evidence being shown. And since then, they've really gone full hammer. They've got a lawyer to threaten people not to circulate my version of events, or they could be sued. The station staff are claiming weird things about me, like I've been claiming that I received messages from aliens, that I've been consorting with, people in the station and doing drugs and all this kind of nonsense, right? And so, it's not surprising, because we're implicating the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the government. It's a government agency, and the Government of Canada monitors every program at Co-op Radio and funds the station. About 50% of its revenue comes from the government. So, it's not far-fetched to realize that prior to this news breaking in the press, which it did a week after I was banned, all of these stories came out that the Vancouver police knew that women were being abducted and killed, and they didn't do anything about it, basically because they're implicated, as are judges and other people who have been named. So when you put that all together, and the fact that I was about to leave for Europe to serve the summons on the Pope, I think it's definitely a more of the silencing censorship campaign, and it's coming out of the government, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They have a whole Black Ops division that works on this stuff. I've seen it operate time and again over the years.
And is it right you're trying to set up your own little blog radio instead? Could you tell us what that station is, and when people can tune into that show, maybe?
Well, frankly, I've been so busy with this trip, I haven't, and I'm not the most technological person, technologically adept person, so I'm relying on other people to do that. But there's a number of blog talk radio programs in America that regularly post my stuff, and the best way to be informed about that, our website is www.hiddenfromhistory.org, and there will be announcements about that, within the next few weeks about how we want to regularize that kind of thing. But it's especially important now that we get this out, because the so-called mainstream press is not reporting this big turn that's happened here. The fact that this struggle now is on a much higher level, and people have to be encouraged to come forward now, the survivors with the eyewitnesses testimonies. I'm going to Ireland after this and working with groups there. So I mean, excuse me, that's really important now to have the media front really developed.
You just mentioned briefly where you talked about it's important for the survivors to come forward. Can you tell us a bit about the difficulties that they suffer with this, the trauma that they've had in the past that stops them doing this sort of thing? Because you did say that there were some Indigenous friends of yours that were supposed to come over on this trip, but they couldn't do it, or
they couldn't do it. Some of them were killed, but others were simply too afraid. And it comes down to that. The Native people are in a particular kind of double whammy on this because of the whole racist nature of Canada and America when it comes to Indigenous people. But I don't want to restrict it to that, because the same kind of symptoms and struggle you have if you're an abused victim anywhere. And it comes down to essential loss of self and self-esteem. So, the trouble with trying to deal with this through conventional counseling is, in the case of Native people, if you're living in a country like Canada where there's a law in place called the Indian Act, where you're not a citizen, you're a ward of the state under that law. So you're in the same category legally as a child or a mentally incompetent person. You don't have the right to your own affairs. If you're living on reserve and you're getting money, you're a ward of the state. So it's kind of a blackmail. To get government money, you have to be under their tutelage and control. If you want to be on your own, you don't get government money, and you're prey to all sorts of real problems when you're living on the street, or you don't have access to any kind of support. So you can't recover. In essence, you can't recover as a Native person from this, because the society is aligned against you. Native people are regularly taken away and murdered by the police. The death rate in the Native world is as high as it ever was 50, 100 years ago, in the worst times of the residential schools. And the level of racism, to give you an example, about 4 years ago, I went up to the interior of British Columbia, in a fairly small town, to a conference, and a group of mixed Native and white people